I had an amazing long chat with Jeff Fraser from the UK. He's currently pursuing his UEFA A. He's worked with some high profile clubs like Chelsea and Arsenal and West Ham across different age groups. He runs his own business right now. He's got a franchise of the Football Fun Factory, which is co owned by a former Manchester United player. He's very, very knowledgeable with how to train players of different age groups. The special part about today's podcast is that that we talk about two aspects. Number one, the coaching aspect, and number two, being a businessman, running a coaching business. So it's a long video, more than an hour. Suggest you grab a coffee, stick your earphones in, and listen to the entire thing, because I'm sure you can take a few good notes. Also, he speaks about what the UEFA A course is like, that's run by the English FA. So go ahead and enjoy. Another interesting podcast with another very interesting guest, Mr. Jeff Fraser, who is currently doing his UEFA A. Jeff has got 14 years of coaching experience with some reputed clubs in the UK like Southend, Lleyton Orient, Arsenal, West Ham, Millwall, Chelsea, in different environments. So, Jeff, thank you for being on this show, and how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Ryan, for having me. Looking forward to having a good conversation with you.
100%. Let's hear about what your journey's been like in coaching so far.
Sure. Well, I originally tried to make it as a player, and unfortunately, I didn't make it into the professional game. And I played what in England would be a little bit of non-league football, so semi-professional football, but at quite a low level.
Yes.
And I very quickly realised that wasn't even maybe going to make a good living from doing that. So I got into coaching very early, from about the age of 18, 19. And I joined, I got my FA coaching badges very young, in my level one, level two, when I was around 18, 19. And I then I got a job with Chelsea Football Club. And that was going into schools and delivering PE sessions. And then after schools, doing after school clubs for the children. That was generally children aged 5 to 12, primary school years. And I did that for a good few years. And during that time as well, I got my UEFA B coaching license. So I got that when I was about 21, 22, 23, I think. So those were really valuable years for me.
Yeah.
In the evenings, we would do development centres then. So similar ages, or 5 to maybe 4, going up to 14 this time. But players we would come across at after school clubs or soccer schools we would do that we thought had potential, and we would bring them then to development centres.
Right.
And then from those development centres, they would then go on to, if they were good enough, to an elite centre. And
Yeah.
if they were then good at the elite centre, they may then get a trial for the academy. So
Yeah.
quite a large ladder for the players. But from that point, after leaving Chelsea, I went to Lleyton Orient Trust, and there I got a job coaching PE in schools in London, but also with the academy. So then I was coaching the under 11s at the academy, and then the under 12s.
Yeah.
I then went to West Ham and coached 16-year-olds doing a post 16 program, which is basically players who aren't in football academies but have football aspirations, maybe want to go and have a career in football. They play football for the college and are studying as well. So I did that for a year. And then at that point, I went to Arsenal and worked for their pre-academy. So that was slightly younger ages, from about 5 to 12, but pushing them players and training those players weekly to try and then get them signed into the academy. So you have the pre-academy, that is 9 and below, essentially, 9 years and below. And then you've got the academy, which is 9 and above. So we don't have academy players here in England that are younger than 9, but we have what we call pre-academy. So clubs invite them in. They can go to other clubs if they want. And if they're in the pre-academy, they're obviously more likely to be signed for the academy. Once they're in the academy, then they can't go and train with other clubs. So after that, then I worked in a school for a company called JMF, delivering PE. I went back to Southend. I actually worked with Southend a few years before that for a short time, but went to Southend working in their pre-academy. And then I started my own business, or I joined a franchise, I should say, called the Football Fun Factory, which I'm currently doing now. Really enjoyable. And I also joined Millwall
Yeah,
Football Club as a part-time academy coach, working for their under-13s,
yeah.
and that is where I'm up to right now.
Right. You have got quite some experience working in different environments. Now, before we go into more football, most of my audience are Indian footballers, football coaches, general football fans from India. So I heard that you have an Indian connection. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, of course. So my father is born in India. He was born in Mumbai, or Bombay, as he would say. And I have an uncle living over there now. Uh, my nan lived there. Of course, my grandfather lived there. They both passed away now. They lived in Bangalore. So yeah, half my family are born in India, or Indian. So yeah, certainly I've got an Indian connection. I think where you might not be able to tell because my mother's Irish.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, yeah.
And have you ever got a chance to visit India and ever experience Indian football?
I've never had a chance to experience Indian football, but I have visited India twice before, though I was very young. Me and my partner actually plan to in the next couple of years. We have a daughter now, so yeah, I'd love to go back to Mumbai. I was very young at the time. I was 9 years old, I think, the last time I went. But yeah, certainly would love to go back. I've been to Bangalore,
Yeah.
Mumbai, been to Goa, um, but would love to do a bit more of India and kind of see a little bit more of my roots.
Yes, I'm sure. I hope you do come, and I'm sure wherever you do decide to visit, the players will have a good experience. So now, in terms of entrepreneurship, now you have experienced the business side of football. Now there are two. So there's Football Fun Factory that you're associated with, and JMF All Stars. So can you elaborate a little more on your involvement?
Sure, yeah. So I joined the Football Fun Factory in 2021, and what the Football Fun Factory is, it's a franchise.
Yeah,
So it was started by uh, three guys: James Cutting, Johnny Martin, Luke Chadwick. Luke Chadwick played for Manchester United, um, and the idea of the Football Fun Factory in England, football there's some perhaps environments where football's really serious,
yeah,
and maybe to the point where it's too serious that drives kids away from
yeah.
football. And we don't want to do that. We want to do the opposite, don't we?
Right,
When we're training our children, when we're training kids, we want the kids to have a really good time so that they want to come back.
right.
It's sounds obvious, but if you're enjoying what you're doing, you're going to learn it quicker.
Yeah,
So that's kind of one of the ethos of the Fun Factory. It's for all kids of all abilities to come and just enjoy themselves. But we make sure that the children come to the football sessions and enjoy themselves. So um, I got in contact with the Football Fun Factory, and it was a business opportunity where you would have a kind of a territory,
yeah,
and then it would be up to me to go out and organise the venues, what evenings the sessions will run,
yeah,
go out and then advertise the sessions. That would all be through social media, um, and then children would come. They'd have a free trial first, and then after the free trial, parents could then choose to sign up via the website that is provided by the Football Fun Factory. So I would essentially be running a business, but I am part of a franchise, if that makes sense. I'm part of the Football Fun Factory. So
yeah,
um, yeah, it's been good. One of the reasons I joined was because in England, when you're working in coaching, the hours are generally really long. So I was working all day in schools delivering football or PE, and then in the evenings I would go off somewhere and do more coaching. Wouldn't get back till maybe 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. And so the reason I joined the Football Fun Factory is because it kind of frees up my daytime a little bit. I'm at home most of the day.
right.
Before then, I go out in the evening and coaching. So
Mm.
it's I've got a daughter now as well, so that was a kind of a big reason just to kind of spend more time with her, especially around the time she was born. And so yeah, that's been really it's been really an enjoyable experience. And I think any coach who's looking to get into coaching in a business, or looking to start their own business, should seriously recommend it, because it does open up a lot of possibilities, and I've certainly learned so much from operating a business.
And yes, I'm sure you address the dropout rates because you're I would say, concentrating on players having fun. But what about JMF All Stars? What's that about?
Yeah, so JMF was a company I joined just for 1 year. It's in a they operate in schools in Kent. A really nice little company. Some really good guys work there,
Right.
um, and they go into primary schools and deliver PE. They work with children who are perhaps challenging,
Right.
or who don't like being in a classroom. So they have coaches that go in and work one to one with children, which is what I did.
Right.
Um, yeah, good company, working in primary schools, helping children learn and manage their behaviours. So that wasn't a business I owned or anything. I was an employee there, but yeah, really enjoyable year I had there.
Right. I assume that it's yours because, J and F. So I just it was just a random assumption. But anyways, that's nice. As a coach now, because you've worked in so many environments, what's your idea as a coach for youth development?
Sure. I mean, that's such a massive question, but I did. I've made some notes here that I'd like to share with you. So, yeah, I mean, so when you're going into coaching,
Yeah.
it kind of depends on the players you're coaching, what ages they are,
Yeah.
how good they are, the environment you're in. All these things you need to consider when you put your practice together, because what you design for 6 and 7 year olds will be completely different to what you design for 15 and 16-year-olds.
Right.
But there's probably some key principles you can have that maybe work across the ages.
Yeah.
So one thing I think, if you keep it fun, if you keep the session enjoyable,
Yeah.
that will help engage kids or engage players.
Yeah.
If players are engaged, they're more likely to learn. So you've got to engage them. I've seen coaches go in, put on a session
Yeah.
that isn't particularly fun or enjoyable for the players. Therefore, the players, after a short time, comes to get bored, maybe lose concentration. Maybe
Yeah.
when the coach is speaking, kind of looking around a little bit.
Right.
And I've seen the coach berate the players, then
Yeah.
shout at the players.
It's-
But when in actual fact, the
Yeah.
coach hasn't engaged.
Yeah.
So that's really important. You've got to engage the players you're coaching. You've got to spark an interest in them so that they're willing to listen, to learn, and to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, so don't overcomplicate it. I think we've all probably been a victim of it. Certainly, I have.
Yeah.
Where on my bits of paper, I've made some notes. I feel like I'll make them do this and I'll make them do that, and they've got to run here and they've got to do this, and then really, when you go and deliver that, you spend most of your time just explaining your practice. I think if you find yourself doing that, you've made your practice too complicated. So
Right.
simplify it for yourself,
Yeah.
for the players. Keep it simple so that the players can understand it quicker. The quicker they understand your practice, the more they can get to practicing and get to learning.
Yeah.
Um, if you can, make it competitive.
Yeah.
So that's always great, because making it competitive means that the intensity levels will probably go up. And the higher you go in football, the more intense the game is, the quicker it is, the less time you have to think. So if you can design your practice in a way that makes it competitive, that's going to be really helpful. Rather than the coach just shouting on the side, trying to get you to play quicker, to get the players to quick, come on, pass it quicker, do this, do that. Rather than the coach being really intense,
Right.
can you make it competitive so that the practice is intense? So, for example, maybe you've got, a simple thing would be just playing at a game, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's the most simple thing. But you
Yes.
might also have one group over there, one group over there, defenders against attackers, defenders against tackles. First to score wins the game. So now you've got this group over here.
Yes.
They're attacking that goal, but they know that they've got to score before that other team scores, if that makes sense. So
Really.
make it intense. And I would probably say, lastly, so we've got make it fun, keep it simple, make it competitive, um, and I would say keep score. Sounds really obvious, but we play a game and we
Yeah.
don't often keep score.
Yeah.
Um, it adds value. The players want to know the score. They are playing for a reason, and that is to win the game. They're not always going to win. And if you keep score, they'll also get used to losing as well. And
Yeah.
that's a big part of football, isn't it? So those would be, I would say, really good principles to have, I think.
These are four really amazing takeaways. Thank you for this. And also now you've worked in the foundation phase with for some high profile clubs. So what are now foundation phase is a very important phase like every other phase. What are your key teaching objectives with the foundation phase?
Yeah. Again, from those principles, they very much link to the principles I've just spoke about, although those principles are probably my own personal ones. But each club has slightly different way of doing things. So the foundation phase we know is the young years from 5 to 11 roughly,
Yeah.
and they're also called sort of the golden years of learning, because that is kind of the years where we as people, as human beings, learn the most, or at least I'm led to believe that's where we learn the most. So I've been in the foundation phase at Southend and Lleyton Orient, Arsenal, and they've all had slightly different ways of doing things. But because I guess Arsenal is probably the most high profile club. I'll give you kind of maybe a bit of background about how they do things.
Yeah.
So Arsenal were very technical driven
Okay.
in the foundation phase. So when I was there was a big focus on developing the player's ability with the ball at their feet. So there were many hours, many sessions spent where we'd get to training, and one of maybe the first half hour, every player would have a ball at their feet.
Okay.
Um, the theory was, I think, it's a good theory, and it's working well for them. That particularly in the modern game, you have these players now that are really technical. They can really manipulate the ball. A lot of them are able to use both feet. Arsenal want their players to be really good with the ball. So when you're in the game and you're in really tight areas and you've got pressure maybe in front of you, you've got pressure behind you, you're able to manipulate the ball with touches on the inside, the outside, the foot, the bottom part of your foot. You're able to twist and turn, keeping the ball under good control, and not being tackled and being able to release the ball. So Arsenal were big on that. They were also quite keen on if you were a good mover.
Okay.
So are you able to move, change direction, speed up, slow down? So not just quick speed, not just being really fast, but can you change direction quickly? And I would say that the last one they had was mindset. So do you have, they called it a champion mindset, and I thought that was maybe a bit strong for such young kids, because I used to think, well, it might be a bit unrealistic to expect children to have a champion mindset, but these were the things they were after and they were looking to develop. So I understood that. So they wanted kids to maybe, if they were losing a game, to work really hard to try and win the game, or if they lost the ball, to run back and win the ball. Did they have these kind of characteristics? These were kind of three really key points that Arsenal would really go after in the foundation phase. I found.
Right. So from a curriculum perspective, was it a lot to do with 1v1s and dribbling skills?
Yeah, sure. So I can give you kind of kind of a structure of how they would use their training sessions. So that there were kind of three key points that coaches would have to try and hit. And then I'll tell you about how they structured the session throughout the hour or 2 hours. So the 3 points were: make the session realistic,
Yes.
try and include repetition
Yeah.
in the session, and make the session competitive.
Okay.
So they were the three elements that us coaches, when we designed our practice, we had to keep in mind. And that's quite hard to do, because I've always found that realism and repetition, they're a bit like the North and South Pole. They're kind of opposites.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, to deliver something that's realistic,
Yeah.
the most realistic thing you can do is to deliver a game. So
Yes.
if you've got 10 players play a 5v5 match, that's the most realistic thing you can do in a football training session.
Yes.
But with that, you might not get, for particular players, certain repetition. So, for example, if you're in a game and you're playing in defence, you're not going to get repetition at shooting,
Right.
most likely.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act. Try and make the session realistic, but can you then include at some points repetition for players?
Right.
And of course, then make it competitive. So you may have seen, I have delivered many a time sessions where you pass to there, then you pass to there, then you run to there, and you pass there, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
These practices have their uses,
Yeah.
but at Arsenal they weren't too keen on them because they didn't think that that type of session practice would drive competition, would drive intensity. The game is intense,
Yes.
so they weren't keen on those types of practice, and I got that. So I think making something competitive is actually really good advice. If you had two groups
Yeah.
and you had players this side, players that side, and you had to do a certain amount of passes before they had to score a goal, so it's a race,
Yeah.
that would probably be better than just having one big group doing this passing with no kind of consequence to having a mistake, this sort of thing. So yeah, Arsenal were they wanted you to make it competitive. In terms of how they would run their session, so I've got a practice here actually, so that's what I can see. So uh, when the players had arrived, they would do an arrival activity, we'd call it,
Okay.
and often it was ball striking. So as soon as the players arrived, they'd go with a coach. The coach is set up kind of in the corner, a little shooting activity. So as soon as they arrive, it could be penalties or it could be really simple things
Right.
like passing into the coach passes it back and you shoot. That's a really basic
Yeah.
shooting practice that everyone does, I think. So, but that's their arrival. So that's as the kids are turning up before. Let's say you start at 5 o'clock in the evening, as a lot of sessions do over here. At 5 to 5, 10 to 5, players are arriving. They're doing this shooting practice.
Right.
Then, as I said, Arsenal were big on making players good with the ball. So they called it ball mastery. So then the first 20 minutes might be ball mastery. And there might be a particular topic. So it could be turning. So they would do lots of turns with the ball. Maybe another topic would be beating a defender. So they would do lots of practice with skills and that sort of thing. So that was the first 20 minutes, almost every session, ball at feet. Then they would go into 1v1s.
Okay.
That'll be the next 20 minutes. Excuse me.
Yep.
So lots of mini pitches, sometimes different size pitches, sometimes different size goals at the end. You can be creative with how you get players to score. It doesn't have to be traditional 2 goals at the end. It could be a box that you have to dribble into.
Yep.
There could be two goals at the end. You can make that with cones. So they have to dribble through the cones. Makes it hard to defend them because you don't know if there's a goal that way and a goal that way. You don't know how to defend. Makes the defending more challenging. But that was 1v1s. They wanted players to be dominant in 1v1 situations.
Right.
Then the next 20 minutes, so this is about an hour and a half session. Next 20 minutes then, so this will take you up to an hour, will be an opposed topic. So then you'd have larger group practice. Could be attack v defense sort of thing. Maybe 4v3s or 4v4s or something like that. And then you'd have your last half an hour would be games.
Okay.
So it will go ball mastery, 1v1s,
Yeah.
opposed topic, and then your last half hour is matches. So that's how they would structure their session.
That's really interesting. So that's like half the session perhaps dedicated towards an actual game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
yeah.
certainly a large part.
Yes, that's sounds interesting. Now, I understand the training structures is really impressive, interesting. But with the U8s to U12s, what was the scouting method of Arsenal? How did they decide whether to bring a player in? What were there any kind of metrics they looked at? How did they?
Yeah. There was. So I sort of touched on it before. So, but I'll go over it again. So, sort of the four that they sort of 4 key areas really that they would look at.
Yeah.
So when they were scouting players looking to bring these players in, they would look at these four areas. So one was efficient movers, they would call them.
Yeah.
So can the player speed up, slow down, change direction? Are they quick? Can they move efficiently?
Right.
Do they look like they've got the potential to continue being an efficient mover and go up through the age groups?
Right.
So certainly efficient mover.
Yeah.
I call it a champion mindset.
Yeah.
So how the player thinks, do they work really hard? Do they give up, or do they keep being persistent? Do they battle? Are they competitive?
Okay.
That would be the second thing. Then they would look for this is probably more of an obvious one. So the technical ability through football actions, they called it. So football actions would just be dribbling, passing, shooting, turning, these sorts of things. So can they handle the ball?
Right.
Are they good with the ball? Can they strike the ball? Can they dribble the ball? So these kind of the obvious ones, I guess. And then the last one would be, do they have potential to be a team player? And that was probably the key word there, is potential, because they don't necessarily expect a foundation player to be a team player just yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I thought which is good. They don't mind seeing a player being a bit greedy at that age. They're so young, aren't they? Yeah. In the foundation age, that they don't mind them seeing a little bit greedy, but do they have the potential to be a team player? Do they value their players around them? Do they moan at other players, or if other players make mistakes, are they encouraging? So they're looking for that characteristic there, being a team player. So those are the four things there.
Interesting. So it's quite there's what they look for when they scout a player is very similar to what they expect in the when the player is inducted. Now,
Absolutely.
now the second reputed club you have worked for is Chelsea. So what did they look at when they were considering? So you were with their development center. So what aspects did they look at when they were considering whether to promote a player from the development center to the academy? And also, it would be good if you could give us a similar overview of how training was like at Chelsea.
Yeah, sure. So I was at Chelsea for a number of years, and I worked at some of their development centres. Now, I wasn't at Arsenal. I was very much working with the academy. I was at Chelsea. I wasn't so much. So I probably can't go into much detail. But what I can say is, when I was at Chelsea, they would look for players who were effective in games.
Yeah.
So these were the players that would then potentially have an opportunity to go and train with the academy.
Right.
So when I say effective, I mean when you're watching a game and they would try and pick the players that are mostly affecting the game and affecting the result of that game or affecting the flow of that game. So it could be that you might have a player who's really dominating in midfield. Maybe they are always the ones making the tackles. Maybe they're the ones that they're always picking the ball up and driving or making passes. So not as much detail here as Arsenal, but that's probably because it was the earliest stage of my coaching career. And I wasn't, I'd worked my way up the ladder at that point. Yeah. But that's certainly something that it was told to me, that are the players affecting games. The players who are affecting games, they're the ones who are going to get pushed through. So with that can raise a lot of questions, I found, because we've got players in the foundation phase who haven't peaked yet, as we know.
Yes.
So you've got to be really careful. You might have players who are particularly small, who haven't gone for a growth spurt yet. They're playing against players who are bigger, stronger, faster, quicker. And therefore they might not stand out as much.
Right.
So you really have to be careful with that. I've learned that as I've got older.
So
as I've developed my...
what's your way of identifying them? What would you do? How would you do?
Yeah, sure. So I think, look, there's nothing, if you're watching a game in the foundation phase and you see a player and he's very dominating, it's no problem bringing that player then on a trial for an academy. That's completely understandable, because who's to say that player can't continue to dominate? We don't know. None of us have a crystal ball. But we just got to be a little bit more clever sometimes when we're looking at players, and not always look past players who aren't dominating, because you've got players who are smaller, not as tall, not as strong, not as quick, and that might not always be the case. But what's happening here? So if you've got a player and they've got all those disadvantages, well, then every match they play is harder for them,
Yeah.
every single match. And if the challenge for them is harder in every single training session, in every single match, the likelihood is that they are going to make actually the greater improvements.
Yes.
So in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years time, they're going to be able to think quicker because the game for them personally has always been quick.
Right.
Whereas some of the bigger lads,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example right now. So I've seen, I've been at Millwall the last 3 years, and there's a player I've coached recently. He's a good player, to be fair. He's a good player, but I worry for him in the future. And the reason I worry for him is because when I coached him, sometimes the ball would come into him, and his touch might not be so great. It might bounce off him. He's a big lad, really big, always one of the biggest on the pitch. Sometimes he was, and then someone would come and try and take the ball off him, but all he would do, because he was so big, so athletic, he'd step forward, he'd move the player out of the way.
Yeah.
And he'd carry on dribbling. So there was no real consequence there to his bad touch. Now, he may not be the biggest and the quickest all his playing career.
Yeah.
There might be a time in a few years where people are going to catch up physically with him. Yeah. Now, in a few years, if he takes that bad touch again, and someone comes to take the ball off him, he's not going to be able to just push that player out of the way this time.
No chance.
So therefore, we've got to be really careful with that. We've got to make sure that players are that the bigger players. If we have big players, we really need to push those players, and maybe they should play with older ages. So if you've got a 10-year-old who's really dominating because and you think it's because maybe he's physically, maybe he's quicker, he's stronger than everyone, and that 10-year-old should probably go and play with some 11-year-olds,
right?
Maybe even some 12-year-olds, perhaps, just to challenge him. And so that he has to find now different solutions.
Right.
Because what's really natural for kids, if they're big and quick, is just to use their arms, use their speed, use their physicality. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's what they should do. They're doing what's working for them, and why wouldn't they? So then it's up to us coaches, though. It's up to us coaches to go, right, well, okay, they're just using their speed, their physical strength. But they're going to need to develop their football skills, their technical ability. How do we do that? Well, if we match that player against people who he can't run past quickly, if he can't push out the way, then they're going to have to use their football skills. Right. That's what sometimes the smaller players have, and it can get overlooked, and it probably gets overlooked now. Although I think as a country in England, we're better, certainly much better than we were. We've got players now like Phil Foden, who are really technically gifted, that are coming through the ranks, and there's others as well. But certainly we mustn't lose kind of track of keeping an eye on players. Sorry, I want to go back to your question that you originally asked. So nothing wrong with bringing an athletic player through, but we've got to keep an eye on some of the other players who are affecting games in different ways. It may be subtle ways. Can they play quickly? Can they play in tight areas? Are they using different parts of the foot? If you've got a young player and they're trying to pass the ball the outside of their foot, and maybe they don't pull it off, you're thinking, well, blimey, if they're trying that now, and it looks like their technique isn't too bad, they're trying it now, where are they going to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years time? So it's about, I think, probably watching a game and just keeping really open-minded when you watch, and trying to see subtle things that players are doing, not just the obvious things, not just that big player who runs past everyone scoring goals. Is there a player who's maybe getting lots of assists? Is there a player who always seems to keep the ball using only a couple of touches? Is there a player who always seems to maybe dribble past the player but then quickly cross it or get a shot away? Might not be always being the most notable things, but subtle things I think we need to watch out for.
Really interesting point of view, because globally we are stuck with the always being more finding the player who's stronger, a bit more attractive than the others. So really interesting. Now, before we go into a bit more of your own strategies, can you just tell me a bit of what West Ham was like, since they were quite
sure. So I mean, so my role at West Ham wasn't within the academy.
Yeah.
My role at West Ham was I worked within a college program.
Okay.
Excuse me, for 16 to 18-year-olds. So these lads, they weren't professional football players, but they had kind of aspirations to go on and play football. So they were studying. They would be on a sports science course, I think it was, and then they would play for the college.
Yeah.
And then it was my job to train the lads. Now I was at that time I was predominantly training the second team
Okay.
at college, and really it was very much left up to myself and the college coaches to design the practices and design a kind of a playing style.
Right.
So we very much it didn't come from West Ham, the football club. It would come from us. Then we would develop a playing style, and because it in that environment where you've got players and you've got players coming through every year.
Yeah.
So you'd only have players for as long as 2 years, and then they would leave the college and go off and do and work in full time, get a full time role, or they'll pursue football as a career. We would play to the players' strengths. So it wasn't a case of, well, this is how we're going to play. You've got to run here when this happens, and you've got to pass here when this happens. It was like, what players do we have? We've got two fast wingers. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and get the ball out wide and get our wingers to run at the fullbacks. It was more around the players we had, what strengths we had. Can we make our players work well in a team so that we're successful? So that was kind of the aim for us in the year I was there.
Interesting. You've worked at so many environments and you've, worked with so many age groups. So can you tell me, how do you customize your practice designs to cater to these different age groups?
Yeah, sure. So look, you need to create a practice that is relevant to your players and your environment.
Yeah.
So it depends what your environment is. So the questions you need to write yourself. So how old are your players?
Yeah.
Because your practice needs to be relevant to their age. They need to be able to understand. There's no point. You can go on the internet now and you can find a session by Jose Mourinho, Pep Guardiola. There's no point in delivering that session to 6-year-olds. There's no point. So make sure that your practice is age appropriate.
Yeah.
And then we just go back to right to the start about how we like to coach, or at least how I like to coach.
Yeah.
Make it fun, keep it simple, make it competitive, make it intense. So if you can stick to these principles, you're not going to go far wrong. But whatever your practice that you design, it must be age appropriate. You might then need to make it level appropriate.
Yes.
So depending on how good the players are, you could have a group of 12-year-olds who are almost as good as another person's 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got to really make it simple then.
Yes.
But these 12-year-olds, they might be maybe they're academy players. Then you've got to really set the bar high. But I think those principles we went over at the start, you're not going to go far wrong if you follow them.
Right. It's interesting because, on YouTube, there are so many videos of Pep Guardiola sessions, and then those are delivered in the wrong environment. So yes, that's quite a good point. Now, you've worked with the youth. You have also worked at adult football level at men's football. So you were as a first team coach. Can you tell us how that changed everything? How it was different?
Yeah, sure. That was a really, really enjoyable experience for me. I mean, it was a very a fantastic learning curve for me. So yeah, it was the first time I'd gone into kind of the first team environment. So it was for a club called Holbridge Sports FC. I was there just for 1 year, and I was a assistant coach there. So there was a manager, and then there was a sort of head coach, and I was the assistant coach. But I would be the one often delivering the training, which I really enjoyed.
Okay.
So we got together. When I joined that club, we got together, me, manager, assistant manager, and we kind of developed. We had a chat about how we wanted to play, the formation we wanted to play, the style of play, in possession and out of possession. And then it was a case of going into pre-season, delivering sessions to get the players fit, but then delivering sessions around how we were going to play. We kept it simple. we were going to go 4-4-2, and we were going to try and press really aggressively. It was quite a low level of semi-professional football, so often teams didn't often keep the ball very well. So we thought we might, if we can press, we might be able to pen teams in.
Yep.
We thought maybe playing with 2 up front as well, which wasn't the done thing at the time. Everyone was kind of 4-3-3. Thought maybe playing 4-4-2 might, and playing quite direct, might try. It might help us progress. The pitches weren't also always very good at that level, so we didn't think we would be able to play it too much. Although we would try and play a little bit. But what I really liked about coaching at that level is that it's very much results based.
Yes.
So it's kind of it comes away completely from what I'd been used to, which is developing players and not really being too concerned with the results. But now it's the opposite. It's, well, if you don't get results, you're going to potentially lose your job. So
yeah. Well, you had to deal with players very differently because they were adults. So can you tell me how you had to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're never going to go far wrong if you're being really honest, but it can actually be really hard to be honest sometimes, because you have to have really tough conversations with players and say, look, I don't think that you're our best right winger, so you're not going to play much until you can prove in training or during the opportunities you get, maybe from the bench or playing in the reserves, that you can be in the first team.
Right.
But when you manage and coach with honesty, it gives players clarity, and they often respect you more. It can be really hard to have some conversations and some decisions that you make. You're not completely sure, but you have to tell the player that, well, this is where I'm at. This is what I think at the moment. You can change my mind, but you're going to have to do so through your performances in the next few weeks. So it was certainly a challenge when you've got a big squad. I think we had nearly 20 players in the squad. And obviously, of course, only 11 play and 5 are on the bench. So there's always some that don't even make the squad on a match day. So it was certainly a challenge to try and keep players engaged, feeling valued, because it's not always about the players who will play almost every game. You've got these fringe players as well who need to be prepared if there's an injury, or if a player in the first team, if their form dips, they need to be able to come in and feel valued and feel confident to then go and deliver. And sometimes they can surprise you as well. So I think at the start of the season, I would say there was probably 2 or 3 players who by the end of the season were out of the starting 11. But it was certainly a challenge. And what I think one of the ways to solve that is just being honest with players. If they can see and sense you're being honest, they'll respect you for that.
100%. Clear and direct, honest communication. Now, I think you've really given a great insight when it comes to with the art of coaching. Now, until the end, I'm going to be asking you a lot of entrepreneurship related questions because you're involved with the business side of football.
Sure.
So can you tell me what was the process like of associating with Football Fun Factory, and how would you measure the success in terms of a business with them?
Yeah, so okay, so I joined the Football Fun Factory 2021, and I guess the process for me was I sort of explained earlier. I kind of wanted a change of lifestyle, where I wanted to I wanted to have maybe not kind of be out of my house working in schools and then going out and coaching in the evenings. I wanted to be able to run a business from home where I could spend a bit more time with my family. And I guess the process of that, the learning curve I had to really get wrap my head around was, well, starting up a business for one, and then kind of marketing your sessions. Because of course I would go and book a venue and a time and a day, and I would say, right, in 2 months' time we're going to start at this venue, this place, this time, and I'm going to hire you for the next year. And the venue will go, okay, that's going to be it might be £35 an hour. So I'm thinking, right, okay, well, I've got to now get kids at my sessions paying, so that I'm not going to be losing money. So that's where kind of that's when then you need to go away and start advertising. Now, one of the things we do at the Football Fun Factory, we do a lot on social media.
Yeah.
So we advertise a lot. We post. We engage on social media. We comment. We look. You can search for football in your local area. You can kind of see the people who might be interested. So you might send them a message, or you might post in groups, your local community groups. These sorts of things help. So there's other ways as well to advertise. So I got leaflets made, and I had them actually put through people's letterboxes. I went into schools, and I delivered. At the start, I went into a school and I delivered just one day of PE.
Right.
Did one afternoon of PE, and then at the end of the day, I handed all the children leaflets, and then I went to a different school in a similar area and did the exact same, so that the children were familiar with me, and then they would get leaflets, and then that's kind of how it started. And even as the business has gone on, the years have gone by, I probably don't go into schools as much, but those things are always really good to kind of get people in the door at the start. Even to continue getting people in the door, it gets your name out there, gets your face out there, makes people familiar with you, and therefore people are more likely to kind of come to your football sessions.
Interesting strategies for sure. And were there any major challenges you faced or face in running a coaching business?
Yeah, so I mean, there's been a few. I would say the obvious one. Sort of when I first started, my daughter had just been born, and then I had a car crash as well. So my car got was in the workshop for a number of weeks, and that was really difficult. And then when it came back, it wasn't. It would break down quite a lot. So that was tough because I had to start then getting taxis to sessions, and you can imagine, because it's my session, I have all the footballs, all the cones, all the equipment. Trying to get that into a taxi, that was really, really tough for me personally. But
And
one
the
thing that
cost of
happened
the
was,
taxi.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So
Yes.
I think one thing you have to sort of swallow is when you start a business, you have to be prepared at the very start that you're not going to immediately make profit. It's definitely a gradual thing. You have to be prepared that for the first few months that you're going to have to pay out, but hopefully in the long term, that will then pay off.
Yes.
So pay out to pay off.
Yes.
But one thing that was really challenging for me was I had a session that had been running for a year, and then the venue turned around to me and said, "Oh, by the way, we're closing down, so we're not gonna be here anymore." And I had 30 children signed up to that session. So then I had to start a new session elsewhere, and I had to kind of start all again. So that was really challenging because you immediately, when that session ended, I immediately lost 30 children.
Was the location not close by to the old location?
No, so the new location was far away, so those children now couldn't transfer over. The reason being is because in that location, that was the only venue really.
Okay.
The only venue with the facilities to facilitate a football session.
Right.
It's quite a small area, so I had to look at a different area completely.
Yes.
I managed to find one, but it was again about starting that whole thing again. But by that point, the challenge was because as you start your football business and children sign up, how our business works is they sign a monthly subscription, so they don't pay per session. So if they want to come to us, the first few weeks are free. It's actually a 3-week free trial, so it gives the children plenty of time to find out if they want to join. If they want to join after that, the parents then pay a monthly fee, a bit like Netflix.
Yes.
Right, so you pay a monthly fee for Netflix. So it's like that. So you build and build and build the children. Now, when you lose 30 kids like that, that's then a significant amount of income. That's 30 monthly subscriptions gone, just like that. So that then it becomes quite difficult to manage because you're now you've got way more children. You've got more coaches at other sessions that you now need to pay for, and you need to continue paying, of course.
Right.
But you've lost 30 children. You've lost a significant amount of money. So that certainly was a challenge to kind of manage the budget like that. But luckily, we've found a new venue, and it's, although it hasn't taken off as much as I wanted it to, it's starting to grow slightly now. So
Right.
so we're probably in a better place.
And when I go on to Instagram, I see that there are a lot of British coaches, English coaches who are offering one-to-ones. And it's like
Yeah.
Instagram is full of that. So what is the potential of the one-to-one coaching business in the UK?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies offering one-to-ones, so there certainly is a market for it.
Yeah.
Me personally, I've never done one-to-ones. Well, I have done one-to-one sessions many years ago, but I stopped. I was too busy. But um, one thing I would say about one-to-ones is I've seen some really interesting practice, and I've seen in my opinion, which
Yeah.
wouldn't be so effective practice. So one-to-one training can be really useful, but it's got to be um, realistic, and it can be really difficult to make realistic.
Yes.
That's the thing. Sometimes one-to-one training might be not necessarily improving. Let's say you're a striker,
Yeah.
and you go to a one-to-one coach, and you say, "Well, I want to get better at finishing." So the obvious thing to do is take lots and lots of shots.
Right.
But in actual fact, one-to-one coaching might actually help you improve your confidence.
Yeah.
So if you come to me and you're a striker, and you are, I want to get better at finishing. Okay, well, I'm going to pass you the ball. I want you to turn and shoot into the goal, but there won't be any goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So that way you get lots of repetition at seeing your ball hit the back of the net. That's something psychological. So I think that in terms of that can be really helpful when going to one-to-one coaches, that they can improve your confidence.
Yeah.
They can improve your belief, this sort of thing. They can improve your technique. I believe that they can. However, I don't think there's a substitute for a realistic experience like playing in a match or training with other players.
Yeah.
That's really hard to replicate, because that is way more real. That is football. That is a match,
Yeah.
playing against other players.
Yeah.
So if you're doing one-to-one stuff and there's no opposition,
Yeah.
it might have a limiting effect on you. But I certainly think it can improve technique slightly. It's practice, isn't it? Practice. So you're getting used to the motion of turning and shooting, for example. But it is limited because of the lack of opposition. But it can improve confidence, I think.
Right, right. No, I agree. I agree with it. It may not put you in the most realistic scenario. Now, if we go through any coaching WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, one of the biggest gossip points is dealing with parents, because sometimes they can be very difficult. So, can you shed some light on if you have had to deal with difficult parents? If so, maybe explain the scenario and how you dealt with it.
Sure, sure. I'm gonna tell you a quick story, a very quick story. Okay, so I was working for. I won't tell you the club, actually. I won't tell you the club I was working for, but I was working for a professional club, and in the academy system in England, parents aren't allowed to shout on the side. They can cheer and encourage, but they're not allowed to shout instructions at the kids on the side. And that's in academies. Now, at grassroots level, that is rife. So that happens all the time, and it shouldn't. But it's a cultural thing here we've had in England for years, and it's not good. It's because then parents take it way too seriously, and they start then affecting the decisions of the players on the field, which is not good. Sometimes parents can get way too carried away. So I was at a club, and one of the parents of the players on our team started shouting at his boy and the other players, telling them what to do, getting really frustrated. And so I was the assistant coach at the time. What the coach did, he didn't say anything. After about 5 minutes, he took the boy off, and he said to the lad, I want you to go around, tell your dad to stop shouting, and when he does that, you can play. And I watched him. He walked around the pitch, and he was looking up at his dad like this, and you couldn't hear it obviously because it was the other side of the pitch, but you could see this man's face just go bright red. And I thought, wow, what a way to deal with a parent. And that dad did not say a peep for the rest of the game. Look, we're lucky in academies because the parents want their children to be in academies, and they don't want to mess it up for their own child, so they behave themselves. I had an issue at Millwall on my very first season. So it's very, very rare in academies you get any issues, but I did have an issue with a parent. His first game, his son had just been signed, and he was up and down the touchline. And we stopped the game. I walked across the pitch, and the game continued. And I said, "Look, sir, can I have a chat?" And I had to explain to him how we do things. So I think if you've got parents bringing their children to your football, I think something that's really good is that if you give that parent maybe a parent code of conduct, so like you give them a guide of how to behave on the side, and you explain why. Explain why that shouting at the children isn't helping them. That is going to be massively beneficial, because the reason they do it, they actually want the best for their children. They want the best. They don't know any different. That's how they were treated when they were playing. They were shouted at. So they don't think anything of it. They think that's the way to be. So if you have a parent code of conduct, that's really helpful. And if you actually explain why, you can do it in person, or you can do it with a coaching conduct that we have. It just educates the parent. Look, you shouting at your kids isn't helping them, because then they're going to start making decisions that that you would make, not necessarily them. We don't mind mistakes. That's how kids learn. This sort of thing. You're going to educate the parent. You're going to encourage that parent. Actually, my shouting isn't helping my child. And if the parent realizes that, they're going to stop the shouting on the sideline.
Again, it's similar to dealing with an adult who's playing for you in men's football. Maybe that clear communication helps over there. So yes,
Absolutely.
so now, since you have had such a amazing experience coaching at different places, how much has that kind of coaching experience helped you in running your coaching business?
What, in terms of working at academies?
Yes.
Yeah, no, massively. I have to say, I think that how I coach at academies is different to how I coach at the business, but certainly what it's done for me is helped me design practices for my business that I know that the kids will enjoy. So that's been really helpful. It's been working in academies has certainly helped me to support the coaches I've got working for me for my business. I'm able to support them with their practice design, with how they deliver. How I deliver my business sessions is different to the academy ones. The academy one is maybe a bit more about developing the player technically and their understanding of the game. My business sessions, they're more about developing the players' love for the game. So we use a lot of praise, a lot of encouragement. We make sure they're having fun. So if they do something well, we praise it. We look at effort over outcome. I think that's a good principle to have, by the way, in general. A lot of coaches, I think, will only look at the outcome. So if your player makes a pass and gives the ball away, they might, let's say a coach then might criticize that player, but perhaps actually that player, it was the right decision to make that pass. It just wasn't the execution. Sometimes it's the bad decision. Sometimes you can pull out a pass. You can make a pass to a teammate. But that's maybe not the best decision. You've pulled off the execution, but maybe it's a backwards pass. Maybe it's a sideways pass when really there was a forwards pass that you could have put your striker through on goal. So value the intent and effort over the outcome. That's certainly something we do at our business sessions, but I think that's a good principle anyway to have, certainly going through the youth phases. If you're coaching a youth player and they see that you value their effort, they're going to keep trying. So
Quite an important message, effort over outcome. Now, you're also in the process of obtaining your UEFA A license. So, can you now that's again a big dream for a lot of coaches. Everyone wants to reach that A license and pro license. So, can you describe the experience of being on the course, the maybe the course content, the assessment methods, the duration, and any other extra additional information?
yeah, sure. So I started the course in January this year, and I've just finished the last block at the end of November.
Yeah.
So the block is split into six points, or six blocks, if you like.
Yeah.
So there's build the attack, um, create the attack, finish the attack. So those are the three
Yeah.
attacking.
Yeah.
And then there was pressing, so a high press, mid block, and a low block.
Okay.
So those were the six blocks. Now each block is 2 days.
Yeah.
So for example, the first block was creating the attack. So you attend the course. You go up to there, so St George's Park. That's where the England first team train in England, and that's where they hold many of their national courses.
Yeah.
So you'd go there. The FA tutors would then show you. They might show you some clips of the England team playing out, or lots of clips of different other teams playing out. You'd maybe discuss different ways of playing out in different formations, different styles. Yeah. The tutors, who are really experienced, really good, they would then put on a session, so you can kind of watch and observe, and then every block we had to deliver.
Yeah.
So we had to go out and deliver then. So on the first block, you would have to go and deliver for example, the first block to build the attack. So you'd have to go out and build the attack session. They would then get a team in. It wouldn't be a professional team, but it would be maybe a group of 18-year-olds from a local club who were quite good, who could play a bit, so you were able to coach. But those are the blocks. So there's 6 blocks over the course of the year, and in between blocks you'd have homework to go away. You'd have videos to go and watch on YouTube. Lots of videos on YouTube. If you go on FA coaching on YouTube, FA've got loads of videos out on YouTube for the public to see, and a lot of those videos we had to go through and watch on our UEFA A license. So a lot of those videos are really worth going to have a watch. But certainly, I've learned a lot. Probably learned a little bit more technical detail, and I've probably learned a little bit more how to coach. And be more effective within my coaching, I think.
And can you tell me more about the assessment methods?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so the criteria would be practice design. So that would be one. So they look at how you design your practice.
Yeah.
They would look at your coaching intervention.
Yeah.
Interventions. In fact, I could probably get the list for you. Do you want me to get the list for you, Ryan? Is it?
You'd like? Yes, why not? I mean, it'll be a good perspective for every coach.
Cool. I assume you can edit this, can you?
I mean, we can keep it natural.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of information are you delivering? Coaching behaviors.
Yeah.
So how are you delivering? How is your tone of voice? And your coaching position. So where are you positioning yourself? Do you see?
Yeah.
Can you see the whole play? Can you see what you're looking for, if you like? Yeah. Another one was actually they were quite keen on a starting position. So how do you start your practice? Because if you're delivering, let's say you're delivering a finishing the attack practice, then you need in your practice to get lots of repetition of players shooting, right?
Yes.
And that was a critique I had in one of my sessions. I did a finishing the attack practice, but actually there wasn't that much shooting going on, and it was something the tutor said to me. he said, well, why don't you change your start position? So because of the philosophy of my own club at Millwall, we get lots of crosses in the box. So I had to change my start position. So I actually started in that particular practice.
Yeah.
I started with the winger, just getting a cross into the box immediately.
Right.
And that's how my practice started then. So immediately I might have someone getting a head on it, or it might be headed out, but then for someone to shoot. So I immediately starting in that area of the pitch,
Right.
hopefully getting a shot on goal quite quickly, and then I can start coaching that
Right.
part. So those are certainly some of the assessment points that the tutors were looking for.
Interesting. That's interesting. I think you've really explained it well for all the UEFA Bs who plan on who are lucky enough to get onto a course. Now, just before we end any podcast, I have a standard question. What are your future plans as Jeff, and what are your plans as a company?
Well, I certainly want to pass my UEFA A. So now that I've completed the course, I've by probably summertime 2024, I'd like to have passed. And I think that's certainly realistic.
Right.
So once I've passed, I'm probably looking in the long term to get into full time working at a club. That's long term. I'm enjoying doing the business now. And as I said to you at the beginning, the business has given me a little bit of free time in the day. My daughter's only 2 years old, so she's still sort of running around here at the minute. But long term, I think I might continue doing the business, but part time, and look to work full time at a club like Millwall, maybe one day where I'm at now, working at the older age group. So the UEFA A is really great qualification to have. Certainly working at the older age groups. I'm working with the under 13s at the minute, but perhaps maybe to work my way up the age groups. That will be probably a long-term goal for me.
I really hope that I wish you all the best with your endeavors. It was a very, very interesting podcast because we spoke about the environments at the different high-profile clubs you have been with. We have also got a good picture of of your coaching methodology as well as what the UEFA is like, and it's been an interesting chat and a useful podcast, I'm sure, for all the listeners around. I thank you for your time because you've given me more than an hour of your time, and I'm sure you need to rush off somewhere. So yes, I appreciate it. Thank you for for agreeing to be on this podcast.
No problem, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me, and I really hope that the people watching this or listening to it will find it useful. And I've seen some of your previous interviews, Ryan. They're really good, mate. So some of the work you're doing is, I think, really helping coaches. I found some of the interviews you've done really useful, mate. So keep up the good work yourself.
I appreciate it. Thank you.